What would you do if your neighbor tried to steal the lifeblood of your family's legacy? That's the question Tom Harper faced, standing on the cracked, thirsty fields of his farm, staring at a river that had sustained his land for generations. This wasn't just dirt and crops to Tom. It was his father's sweat, his grandfather's dreams, a piece of the Harper family woven into the rolling hills of a valley that was changing faster than he could keep up. Sub-BVY scions and strip malls were swallowing up the farms around him, and the quiet community he'd grown up in was turning into a battleground for land and power. But Tom never imagined the real fight would come from the woman next door, a woman named Linda Grayson, who was about to turn his world upside down. Tom's farm was his sanctuary, a place where he could lose himself in the rhythm of the seasons, away from the chaos of a world that seemed to value profit over principle. He'd inherited the land from his late father, who'd built it from nothing, coaxing life from the soil with calloused hands. To Tom, selling was unthinkable. This wasn't just a business, it was who he was. But the pressures were mounting. Costs were climbing, profits were shrinking, and developers were circling like vultures, offering sums that made his neighbors' heads spin. One by one they sold, their fields paved over for cookie-cutter houses. Tom held firm, determined to keep the Harper legacy alive. Then came Linda. Linda Grayson wasn't your average neighbor. She was a forestall commanding, with a smile that never reached her eyes. She'd always been the type to throw her weight around, using her status as a big-time property owner to bend others to her will. At first, her moves were subtle, borrowing tools, dropping hints about property values, making you feel like you owed her something. But Tom soon realized Linda wasn't just fishing for favors. She had her sights set on something much bigger: the river that ran through his farm, the water that kept his crops alive, his livestock fed, his family's dream breathing. Without it, the farm was nothing. It started with a letter, crisp and official, landing on Tom's kitchen table one morning. He was sipping coffee, sorting through bills, when he saw it, a law firm's logo, his name in bold. His first thought was a mix-up, maybe a tax issue or some paperwork glitch. But as he tore it open and read, his stomach dropped. Linda's lawyer claimed she owned the river. The water Tom had relied on his whole life, the water his father had used, his grandfather before him, was now, according to Linda, hers. She demanded a hefty fee for Tom to keep using either she'd cut him off. Legal action, the letter warned, was next. Tom sat there stunned. The river was part of the land, wasn't it? How could she claim it? He never questioned his right to it, never imagined someone could just take it. He tried talking to her. He marched over to her sprawling estate across the creek, heart pounding, determined to sort this out. Linda answered the door with that same fake smile, her eyes glinting like she'd already won. She offered tea, he declined. "Linda, this doesn't make sense," he said, keeping his voice steady. "That river's always been shared. It's part of the land. You can't just claim it." Her smile didn't budge. "Oh, Tom," she said, syrupy sweet, "I'm not claiming anything. I'm just making sure the water's used fairly. You've been taking more than your share for years. It's time you paid for it." Tom shook his head, disbelief turning to anger. "You're saying I've been stealing? All this time?" "Not stealing," she replied, her tone icy now. "Just mismanaging. I'm done letting you profit off my water." The conversation ended there, but Tom knew this was no misunderstanding. Linda wasn't backing down. She'd done her homework, exploiting the murky laws around water rights and their region laws Tom had never had to think about, too busy keeping the farm afloat. Now, she was using his ignorance against him, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Pay her fee, and the farm would sink into debt. Fight her, and he'd face a legal battle he couldn't afford. But as he stood there, her smug face burning in his mind, something snapped. He wasn't going to let her win. Not without a fight. The days that followed were a blur of frustration and fear. Tom pored over old deeds, public records, anything he could find to prove the river was his. The more he dug, the more uneasy he became. The documents were a mess: vague boundaries, shared land clauses, terms that left too much open to interpretation. He called a local lawyer, someone who'd helped with small farm issues before, but the guy's face fell as Tom explained. Water rights, he said, were a nightmare in their county. Multiple claims, old agreements, and new laws favoring industry made it a legal minefield. Linda wasn't just bullying him. She was playing a game she knew she could win. Tom learned Linda had been buying up land for years, quietly expanding her empire while cozying up to developers and investors. She wasn't just a farmer with a grudge, she was part of a bigger plan to turn their valley into a commercial gold mine, pushing out small farmers like Tom. The river wasn't just about water, it was about control. And then he found it, an old agreement, decades old, that loosely governed water use among the region's farmers. It was vague, full of holes, and Linda had found a way to twist it, claiming inherited rights that seemed shaky at best. She'd built a house of cards, but it was enough to threaten everything Tom had. Her tactics got uglier. Letters piled up, each more threatening than the last, demanding outrageous sums or hinting at lawsuits. She ignored his calls, dodged his questions, daring him to challenge her. Tom felt cornered, his farm hanging by a thread. He didn't have her money or connections, but he had something she didn't resolve. He started talking to other farmers, quietly at first, asking if Linda had come for them too. A few had gotten letters, brushed them off, too scared to fight. But Tom wasn't scared. Not anymore. He was angry. Then came the idea that changed everything. If Linda could control the water, why couldn't he? The local water supply company, a small outfit that managed the region's distribution, was struggling. Tom had never thought much about it until now. If he owned the company, he'd own the water. He could cut Linda off at the knees. It was a crazy move, one that would drain his savings and bury him in loans, but it was his only shot. He called the owner, a guy named Henry, who was desperate to sell. The deal was risky, Tom's farm as collateral, every cent he had on the line, but he shook Henry's hand and signed the papers, heart racing. He was all in. Linda didn't take it lying down. Her lawyer fired off a cease and desist, threatening lawsuits if Tom didn't back off. She started showing up at his farm, lurking by the fence, watching him like a hawk. It was creepy, unnerving, but it only made Tom dig in harder. The day he took control of the water company, he locked down the river, setting up barriers and monitors to keep Linda out. For the first time, he felt like he was winning. But Linda wasn't done. She pulled strings with the county, triggering inspections on Tom's farm, nitpicking every detail to shut him down. She spread lies, painting him as a greedy hoarder who was starving the community. Her media campaign was slick, playing on fears of drought, making Tom the lane. Neighbors he'd known his whole life started looking at him sideways, and the pressure was crushing. Legal bills piled up, and the constant scrutiny made every day a fight. Still, Tom kept going, building alliances with other farmers, showing them Linda's game. Slowly, they started to listen. The real break came from an old friend, Jack, who'd retired from farming but still had a nose for trouble. Jack had been digging into Linda's deals and found a bombshell. She was tied to a network of developers, laundering money through offshore accounts to snatch up land dirt cheap. The river was just a piece of her plan to control the whole valley, rigging zoning laws to force farmers out. It wasn't just Tom's fight, Anna Marie, it was everyone's. Tom knew exposing Linda was his only chance. He teamed up with a local journalist, Sarah, who had a knack for taking down crooks. They compiled everything: bank records, contracts, proof of Linda's dirty deals. The night before the story broke, Tom sat in his office, staring at the evidence, knowing there was no turning back. Linda would come for him, hard. But he wasn't just fighting for his farm. He was fighting for every farmer, every family she'd bullied. The article hit like a thunderbolt. Sarah's report laid out Linda's corruption in black and white, backed by leaked documents that left no room for doubt. The valley exploded. Protests erupted outside Linda's offices. Her allies abandoned her, and people who'd been too scared to speak started sharing their stories. Linda tried to spin it, going on TV with a teary denial, but the truth was out. Her empire was crumbling. In court, her last-ditch effort to reclaim the river fell apart. The judge, swayed by the evidence and public outcry, ruled for Tom. Linda's claims were thrown out, her schemes exposed. She was left with nothing: lawsuits, debt, and a reputation in tatters. Tom stood in the courtroom, the weight of months lifting off his shoulders. He'd won, not just for himself, but for the valley, for the land, for the future. As the dust settled, Tom stood on his porch, looking out at the fields that were his again. The community was healing, neighbors rebuilding what Linda had torn apart. Tom wasn't just a farmer anymore. He was a leader, proof that one person, backed by truth and grit, could take on a giant and win. The river flowed free, the farm was safe, and for the first time in a long time, Tom felt peace. The fight had changed him, but it had also shown him what he was made of. And as the sun dipped below the hills, he knew, whatever came next, he was ready.